Well, thank you, Kenny. Yeah, so thanks for inviting me to chat with you all today. My name is Tim Eppley, and I'm the Chief Conservation Officer of the NGO Wildlife Madagascar. I have worked in Madagascar for nearly 20 years, and prior to joining Wildlife Madagascar in 2023, I had led San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance's in situ lemur conservation program in Madagascar. I'm also the Red List Authority Coordinator for the IUCN SSC Primate Specialist Group and a visiting scholar at Portland State University. So Madagascar is the fourth largest island in the world, and it's located about 250 miles off the southeast coast of mainland Africa. Um, and for comparison, it's a big place. So it's around 1.4 times larger than the state of California. And so before 180 million years ago, Madagascar was part of the supercontinent Gondwana, wedged between Africa and India. But then around 180 million years ago, Madagascar and India began to break away from Africa, followed by Madagascar breaking away from that subcontinent, India, around 88 million years ago, leaving it as an island and tectonically isolated from other land masses. So that geographic isolation allowed for incredible taxonomic radiations. And today, botanically, Madagascar has well over 14,000 plant species spread across a diversity of ecoregions that are more easily summarized as rainforests in the east, dry deciduous forests in the west, and spiny desert in the south. And even with that incredibly high number of species, approximately 90% of them are endemic, and so they're found nowhere else on Earth. And so also after that split from India around 88 million years ago, there were several mammalian taxon dispersal events, likely via vegetation rafts from mainland Africa. So the lemurs were the first to arrive, followed by tenrecs, which are kind of similar to hedgehogs, and then more recently, euplurid carnivores like the fossa and various rodents. And with little competition, species rapidly diversified to fill the available ecological niches. And so endemism within Madagascar is incredibly high for nearly all taxonomic fauna groups. 99% of reptiles found in Madagascar only occur there, including nearly half of the world's 200 plus chameleon species. 96% of the bird species that breed on the island are also endemic. And then regarding native non-flying mammals, 100% of the 174 species are endemic, which is really incredible. And so because of that extreme botanical and wildlife diversity, Madagascar is considered a biodiversity hotspot and is sometimes even referred to as the eighth continent. Now, Madagascar's most famous residents, as I'm sure many of you know, are the lemurs. And when you hear the word lemur, I assume you think of these guys. These are the ring-tailed lemurs, and they are certainly a fascinating species, and they are well represented in zoo collections around the world. However, the reality is that there are currently 108 lemur species making up 112 lemur taxa, all of which only occur on Madagascar. Unfortunately, even though 112 sounds like a lot, 98% of them are currently threatened with extinction, meaning that they fall into one of those IUCN Red List categories of being either critically endangered, or vulnerable. Now, before we get into talking about why lemurs are so endangered, I want to mention that I'm a co-author on this newest edition of the Lemurs of Madagascar Field Guide. This is a reference work that compiles the latest information on lemur ecology, distribution, and conservation status in one handy publication, basically. And in doing so, we hope to encourage further research, add to our knowledge of lemur biology in general, and stimulate the growth of ecotourism in Madagascar. Now, this is the fifth edition of this book, but at the time of the first edition in 1994, there were only 50 known lemur species. And since the year 2000, there have been 52 lemur species described. And now we have the 108 species making up 112 taxa. So many of the gaps, um, many of those gaps have been filled in this time. So both II and the Harrier dwarf lemur, which were once believed to be very rare and near extinction, but thanks to awareness through the reference book, they continue to be found in new and different parts of Madagascar. And so we're able to expand those areas of this book and learn more. And so it's really been an important work. And then since the arrival of humans on Madagascar, because the book also provides this paleo and ancestral history of lemurs, since the arrival of humans, perhaps within the last 2,000 years, 8 lemur genera and at least 17 lemur species have gone extinct. And that represents 14% of all known lemur species and over a third of all known lemur genera. Worldwide, there are 81 living primate genera. And so those 8 extinct lemur genera represent a loss of 9% of the world's primate generic diversity in historic times. And what's really incredible is that the lemur species known to have gone extinct were all considerably larger than those species surviving today. So Professor Laurie Godfrey is holding a megalodapus skull on the right, and that animal would have been the size of a female gorilla. And then the drawing on the bottom left, that's an Archaeoindris, and that would have been the size of a male gorilla. So these were huge animals that existed around before the arrival of humans, and then died out soon after. So considering global primate species diversity, Madagascar ranks second, only behind Brazil, despite being less than 7% of Brazil's landmass. And compared to Indonesia, which is the third country on this list, Madagascar is roughly 1/3 its size. But unlike those other countries, all 112 taxa in Madagascar are also endemic, so they're occurring nowhere else. So with this very high species diversity and unmatched endemism at the species, genus, and family levels, this makes Madagascar, without a doubt, the world's highest primate conservation priority. And to provide a clearer idea of this lemur diversity, I'm going to go over each of those 5 lemur families. So first, we have the Chirigalidae, which make up 5 genera and 41 species. These are more commonly known as dwarf lemurs, mouse lemurs, fork-marked lemurs. These are in fact the smallest of the lemurs, with the smallest among them being Madame Bertha's mouse lemur, which weighs in around 30 grams, so it can fit in the palm of your hand. And it's also the smallest primate in the world. These lemurs tend to be solitary. They're active throughout the night. Another interesting fact about them is that the dwarf lemurs are the only known primate, or the only primate known to hibernate. So for nearly half of the year, dwarf lemurs are in a deep sleep, which allows them to avoid the lean season of the austral winter. The next family is the Lepidolemidae, which are the sportive lemurs. They're medium-sized, so around 600 to 800 grams. They're nocturnal folivores, and they're relatively little studied. And while there are currently 26 known sportive lemur species, an incredible 17 of those species have been described since the 2nd edition of the Lemurs of Madagascar book was published in 2006. And so you can see in this infographic that there are many areas that are just gray that show the existing forest cover. And so with maps like this printed in that book, student researchers and other researchers can see, oh, there's missing information from this area. Maybe I should go there and collect genetic samples and help figure out whether the species has an extended range or if it's a new species. And so this book is really critical for that sort of research prompting. So the most well-known lemur family, our third one, is Lemuridae. These are the ring-tailed lemurs, the brown lemurs, black lemurs, bamboo lemurs, rough lemurs, basically the typical lemurs that you might see at a zoo. This is a very diverse group with 21 species, mostly medium-sized, somewhere between 2 and 3.5 kilograms. They have diverse social organizations, from bamboo lemurs having close family units, ring-tailed lemurs having large multi-female, multi-male groups, and rough lemurs exhibiting a seasonal fission-fusion organization. Diet-wise, some species are specialists, like the greater bamboo lemur, which feeds mostly on items from woody bamboo, and generalists like ring-tailed lemurs, which will eat a mixture of fruit, leaves, bark, and even insects. The fourth lemur family is the Indridae, made up of the nocturnal woolly lemurs and the diurnal shafak and Indri. These are perhaps the most charismatic of the bunch, and Indri is quite well known as the largest living lemur, weighing around 21 pounds. These species have very long legs and somewhat shorter arms, which allow them to leap between the trees, sometimes reaching distances up to 30 feet. So when people come to Madagascar, very often, as tourists, they'll very often go to places where they can see one of the shafak or Indri species. And then the fifth and last lemur family is Daubentonnidae, which I think might be the cutest. This family is monotypic, having only a singular genus and species, the Aye. Ayes are the largest nocturnal lemur or nocturnal primate in the world. And despite many people thinking that they look evil or creepy with their large ears and that long middle finger digit, which they use to find and dig out larvae from tree stems, they've become quite popular over the past decade and are even in some zoo collections. Still, relatively little is known about these species in the wild, as they are solitary and have very, very large home ranges. So with all of that incredible lemur diversity, it's sad to think that 98% of those taxa are threatened with extinction, with 31% being critically endangered. A large reason for that is because of continued habitat loss, which is a similar scenario around the world. Within Madagascar, there's a lot of slash and burn agriculture. So unfortunately, this photo is a very common scene, even within protected areas. And this often goes hand in hand with hunting. And then over time, this leads to completely degraded landscapes that are further destroyed through erosion. The forest loss is so bad that Madagascar has less than 10% of its original vegetation remaining. And the loss has been exponential over the last 70 years, to the point that 80% of all forest in Madagascar occurs within a single kilometer of edge, meaning that there are very few large forests remaining. So what's the reason for it? It's human population growth. So currently, Madagascar has just over 30 million people, and that amount is projected to double by the year 2050. A large portion of Malagasy are dependent on forest resources, and more than 90% of its population lives on less than $2.15 a day, which is the global threshold for extreme poverty. Furthermore, over 50% of the population is under the age of 18. So even more staggeringly, approximately half of the children under the age of 5 are malnourished. So it's a complicated conservation situation. And as the late Alison Jolly often remarked, it's a tragedy without villains. So with all of that incredible biodiversity under such immense pressure, we realized that we needed to take a different approach to conservation, and thus Wildlife Madagascar was born. There are many conservation NGOs in Madagascar, many of which do an incredible job, but most only focus on a singular area. By contrast, Wildlife Madagascar has taken a three-pronged approach to implement our vision. These include conservation research and biodiversity protection, sustainable development and enhancing agriculture, and ecotourism development. And we realize that all three of these approaches are strongly interconnected. Thus, it's very much a one-team approach. That first prong of our approach is conservation research and biodiversity protection. Though our organization is only a few years old, Wildlife Madagascar has been busy building field stations in each of the landscapes where we work to provide a main site from which we carry out conservation initiatives and conduct scientific research. Much of that work is carried out by local Malagasy graduate students in collaboration with interested individuals from the local communities that are living near our sites. We have lemur-specific teams for long-term behavioral ecology monitoring, as well as large-scale camera trap grids for monitoring the more cryptic and shy carnivores and other wildlife. We also work closely with the local management organization, which in most cases is Madagascar National Parks. Our forest rangers assist and provide additional training to those park agents and community liaisons, supporting and expanding their monthly patrols. These teams also monitor wildlife and assess habitat quality as they conduct their multi-week patrols, allowing us to both identify areas in greater need of protection and to quantitatively assess the effectiveness of our mission. Our second prong is focused on the sustainable development of communities living adjacent to our program sites, and in many cases, incorporating training for enhancing their agricultural practices for greater output. In general, daily access to nutritious food throughout Madagascar is hard to come by. So before we can begin any specific initiatives, we conduct a thorough socioeconomic assessment of all households living adjacent to the forested areas where we are working. And this may include dozens of villages and thousands of households, but it's important to know where the potential issues may be. What does cash flow look like? How are their income streams connected to the location, the environment, and the seasons? So Madagascar experiences a harsh seasonal climate, with some areas experiencing extreme droughts, whereas other areas have extreme flooding. And so in addition to the socioeconomic initiatives, we really aim to build farmer training centers in each of the landscapes to be able to evaluate whether there are other cultivar varietals that may do better under certain local conditions or the changing conditions within some environments. Like our other initiatives, this community engagement would help to strengthen our ties with the local communities while also helping them to maximize their harvest yields. Another initiative that we've been busy with is secondary farming. Issues with food insecurity and lack of nutritious options often leads to wildlife poaching, with lemurs and birds often suffering. It's not that the Malagasy people really want to eat those animals either, but in fact, there are often cultural taboos against such things. But when push comes to shove and your family is starving, this is what happens. So as an alternative, my colleagues took a native tropical plant hopper bug called secondary that was already opportunistically eaten by rural Malagasy people, and they learned how to effectively farm them. And over the past few months, our team has been holding community-wide training workshops to show locals the benefits of farming secondary, including that they are quick to reproduce, easy to harvest, and even easier to cook. Plus, they are loaded with protein, fats, calories, and iron. While some communities that were unaware of this bug were initially weirded out by our proposal to eat the bugs, they get over it pretty fast when they try them and then realize that they taste like bacon. And so all of that helps us to receive nearly 100% community buy-in in the villages where we've rolled out this program. The third and final prong is ecotourism development. Our country director, Lita Razafimahefa, is the president of Madagascar's Confederation of Tourism. And so we're uniquely positioned to build partnerships with high-end eco-lodges. Tourism in developing nations like Madagascar can be tricky, and the majority of those endeavors only ever see backpackers coming through and spending little money, which doesn't really help the locals or wildlife. But high-end tourism that is set up correctly can lead to prosperity for those local communities and truly show the benefit of conserving their natural forests and wildlife. So now that you know a bit more about our approaches, I want to tell you more about Wildlife Madagascar's first three sites, which are Anzanaharaibe Sud Special Reserve in the northeast, La Mananara, which is a private forest within the Anjazoro Bay and Gabu Protected Area in the Central Highlands, and Namaruka National Park in the Northwest. Sorry, my dog's barking. Also, I want to mention that all of our management and staff at our field sites are Malagasy. We work with a lot of Malagasy grad students, so master's and PhD students, and hire and provide training to locals, whether that be as field guides, research technicians, forest rangers, porters, cooks, etc. But we also host several international students at our sites, which then provide shared learning experiences for the next generation of conservationists and researchers. So we'll start with Anzana Sud Special Reserve. This is a low to mid elevation rainforest just west of Andapa in the Sava region. This region produces the bulk of the world's annual supply of vanilla, and you can even smell it while you're hiking in the remote stretches of this largely pristine forest. It's quite rare to have such expansive views of forested mountains for as far as you can see. But this is what Anzana Sud offers, all while being relatively close to the more well-known protected areas of Makira Natural Park and Marajeji National Park. Here are some of the species of potential interest to both tourists and research projects. In particular, both Indri, which is an all-black color morph, and silky shafak are critically endangered and are often included on the list of the world's top 25 most endangered primates. In fact, I should mention that I walked the length of this protected area a couple Augusts ago and could hear Indri calling throughout the day from most directions, which was incredible considering that Indri are not typically that vocal during the austral winter. So this area that's at the northern end of their species range is really a stronghold for this species. And the reptile and amphibian diversity within Anzana Sud is among the highest in the country. And there are likely many new species to be formally described here as we continue to expand our research within this forest. So at this site, we monitor the larger bodied lemurs on a daily basis, collecting behavioral, feeding, and ranging ecology data on silky shafak and Indri and the white-fronted brown lemurs. These monitoring data allow us to evaluate seasonal fluctuations in their diet and gauge their overall health. And as part of our monitoring, we tag all the feeding trees they use, collecting seeds directly from those trees, as well as collecting any whole seeds that they defecate. And then that feeding ecology data help inform our reforestation efforts with all the seeds cleaned and then taken to our nursery where we can care for them until they are ready to plant in strategic areas for building buffer zones and establishing corridors. On the more active protection side of things, this site is well known for crystals such as amethyst, and people come from all over to dig these large open pits, searching for them while living in the forest. And so to combat this illegal activity, we lead large mixed brigade patrols with Madagascar National Parks multiple times per month to monitor these remote areas of the park and actively assist law enforcement with park protection. So according to our extensive socioeconomic surveys in this area, most of the villages around Anzana Sud were in relatively good shape, though there were a few villages which were in desperate need of assistance. And it has been within those communities where our team, led by Aru, has been implementing our secondary program and providing seed stock and various materials to participating households. And so we're hopeful that come October that there will be large harvests of secondary, and these will be a good fallback for those villages. So the second site is La Mananara. This is a private land holding that is within the Anjazoro Bay and Gabu protected area. This site is mid to high elevation, so it stays a bit cooler here during the warm summer months. Given its close proximity to Madagascar's capital of Antananarivo, La Mananara has become our main research training site. We're currently expanding our field station infrastructure here in order to support a larger team, as well as creating accommodations for international volunteers. Some of the species of interest here, again, include injury. This is the southern extent of their species range. Um, and then you can also see the diadem shafak here, which I believe is one of the most beautiful primates on Earth. There's also abundant bird life and even a small lake and several wetland areas on the property that are excellent for bird watching. So in La Mananara, our monitoring team focuses on the injury and diadem shafak groups, but we are also working to habituate large groups of common brown lemurs and bamboo lemurs. And last fall, we welcomed three MSc students from Sapienza University of Rome, and they helped to run our initial diurnal and nocturnal lemur surveys across the entire forest and used camera traps to evaluate native carnivore distribution as it relates to anthropogenic pressure. Those camera traps actually provided us with the first ever evidence of aye, fossa, and phalanoop, which is another native carnivore, in those forests. So that alone was an incredible discovery for that area. And this week, we're welcoming three American undergrads who are in Madagascar for a semester-long study abroad. And they'll be working closely with our Malagasy team on restoration ecology projects. And those projects will help to support our reforestation program, which is largely carried out from our local nursery managed by Des Moines in this photo. Her program includes seed collection, germination studies, clearing land for restoration, monitoring and clearing invasives, community-led tree planting, and even maintaining a vegetable garden that directly provides for our local team. So we're a little behind on the socioeconomics in this area, but our team is currently conducting those surveys in the villages around the periphery of northern Anjezora Bay and Gavu. They're intending to wrap up by May. This work also includes collecting malnutrition data on all children under 18. And the questionnaire survey is the same as the one that was conducted in ASSR and will be conducted at the other site. So we're able to create large comparisons between these areas so that there can be some synergy between the initiatives that are carried out. And the third site we have is Singi de Namaruka National Park. This is an area that's known for its singi, which is the Malagasy term for limestone karst. If you've ever traveled to Madagascar before and visited Singi de Marmaraha or Ankarana, you know that this rock is very sharp. It's like a serrated knife, so you have to be very careful. But it really creates this incredible landscape that's otherworldly. And so it's definitely something that tourists put high on the list of sites to go, things to see when they're in Madagascar. So at this site, we've partnered with a high-end eco lodge that just opened in August of 2024. It's a luxury safari-style camping site, and it's all-inclusive. It's called Namaruka Singi Camp. They have a beautiful bar and the restaurant built right into the Singi. And because it's so remote, you have to arrive via charter plane. Otherwise, it would take you 3 days to get there. Now, unlike the other national parks where you can see Singi and experience that, and those sites are very popular with tourists, here you're alone. There are no other hotels or places to stay. And so you essentially have the entire national park to yourself. Here are some of the wildlife species of interest to both tourists and researchers. We have the Deccan shafak, which is critically endangered, and then red-brown lemurs and Siambikibo sportive lemur, which is a critically endangered species that's only known from this site and one other site further north. Here you can see a bit of what that Singi landscape looks like and how incredible it is. It's the picture on the left, you have some large baobabs on the periphery, and you'll occasionally see the Deccan shafak jump through those canyons. You have to be very careful when you're traversing those areas as it's, again, sharp, and those canyons can be upwards of 30 meters deep. And because this area is being developed for ecotourism, we will eventually put in rope bridges and boardwalks in some areas. In the north, the picture on the right, there is a beautiful natural spring that we've been calling the Blue Lagoon. The water is crystal clear and at least 10 meters deep in some areas, but you can see right down to the bottom. This used to be the perfect place to go for a midday swim, but then we discovered that the Nile crocodiles also prefer this spot. So we've no longer been swimming there. So here we have a couple pictures of the red lemur and Deccan shafak. One of the first things that our team did was work on habituating several groups of these species next to the camp. Having those animals comfortable with being watched by people is key, not only for our ability to monitor those animals in the long term, but also to create that magical experience for guests at the Eco Lodge. The other benefit to that long-term behavioral monitoring is that we will gain a better understanding of which tree species these lemurs feed on seasonally and most heavily, so we can target our reforestation efforts towards those tree species. And better yet, if those lemurs ingest and defecate whole seeds, then we can just directly collect and use those in our nursery to help speed up the process. Like many of the other sites, we have camera trap grids that are systematically set up in areas of the park. So far, we've captured many fossa throughout the park. We have lots of these red-brown lemurs, some excellent photos of Deccan shafak on the ground. But we also have a lot of bush pigs, which are invasive and cause quite a bit of destruction throughout the forest. And while the human population around Namaruka is very small, there are still many feral carnivores like this cat roaming the national park. This one you can see in the photo had just caught a mouse lemur. And as you can imagine, the chances of this being caught on a camera trap are tiny. So their presence is likely quite devastating on the larger native mammal populations. Um, Namaruka is also incredibly interesting for bat species. And there are currently 21 known bat species that occur here, which is the highest bat species richness in all of Madagascar. We recently conducted an inventory throughout Namaruka, as we believe there are at least a few new bat species within this area. So we were cataloging bat acoustic data and identifying priority sites. The diversity is really awesome, and we have approximately 5 Miniopterus species, which is the bat on the left, which are between 5 to 9 grams. So they're so tiny, and they just cling to the cave walls. We also have large roosts of flying foxes that average around 390 grams. So, are massive compared to those Miniopterus bats. The roost site at the southern end of Namaruka likely has somewhere around 2,000 individuals. And since they consume large quantities of fruit and can travel up to 30 kilometers each night, we're going to start collecting defecated seeds from their guano and evaluating their germination rates compared to the whole seeds collected from the corresponding mother plants. And so just like collecting whole seeds defecated by lemurs, this work will help to inform our reforestation strategies. And then because this region is incredibly arid, as is the rest of Western and Northwest Madagascar, wildfires are a seasonal and persistent problem. Locals burn areas for new agriculture and also to generate new pastures for grazing livestock. We recently received a lot of wildfire fighting gear, which will be very helpful as the region becomes drier starting this month. And it's around now that we're also going to begin working with local communities to create large double-sided fire breaks that will circumvent the entire national park, as well as to install several 1,000-liter water tanks equidistantly around the park boundaries to help protect this area and safeguard the remaining forest habitat within the national park. And while those are important measures to take, our primary angle is to mitigate this problem by engaging with local communities, working with the local communities on creating field burning guidelines and best practices for fire safety protocols is critically important. And those simple measures go a really long way. And Before I end, I just want to mention that last year, Wildlife Madagascar created International Chameleon Day, which is held annually on May 9th and has been a huge success with several events held throughout Madagascar last year and even zoos around the world. The reason that we started this is because World Lemur Day, which occurs in late October, has been very successful. And we wanted to create another day for Malagasy people to be proud of their unique and diverse wildlife. While chameleons are found throughout Africa, Southern Europe, the Middle East, and even Western India, Madagascar has nearly 50% of the world's chameleon species diversity. And so, to help encourage this Wildlife Appreciation Day, Wildlife Madagascar created several information guides, activity packets, social media infographics, and even a primary school curriculum, all available for free on our website. It's under the Chameleon event page. And those are available to download in English, French, and Malagasy. And we're hoping to add, to translate them into several other languages. And then new this year, we'll even be adding a secondary level curriculum, which will hopefully be available within the next few weeks. And then lastly, I just want to thank all of our members that donate to Wildlife Madagascar, our collaborators and supporters without whom this work would not be possible. And thank you all for attending today. And if you're so inclined, please find and follow us on social media. You can become a monthly or an annual donor. But on our social media, at least, we regularly post about our work from the field. And we have a number of excellent videos. So please go check them out. Thanks.
So my name is Kenny Coogan. I am the Center for Inquiry Education Coordinator. And Tim just did a presentation for our monthly webinars. Our website is tieseducation.org. We have a very active Facebook group where we post evolution in the news every day. And then we also have an active YouTube channel where we post all of our past webinars. I've also created a playlist for teachers. So if you're teaching human evolution, we have a playlist for that. If you're teaching natural selection, we have a playlist for that. If you're teaching biogeography, we have everything spliced out, ready for you to implement all of our free resources into your classroom. We also have free units available as a download. So if you download the middle school or the high school, which is available in English or Spanish, you have 10 to 15 days and of curriculum. You're good to go. If you don't want the entire curriculum, you can go to our website and you can handpick what you like. We have bell ringers, hands-on investigations, which are also categorized by the different topics. If you don't have evolution in your standards, we also have a section for you there about genetics. All of our resources are free except for our book, and that's because we have to pay the publisher. But right now we're having a buy one, get one sale. So if you buy one evolution book, you get a second one for free where you can gift it to your favorite science teacher. And this is really for our tie started for middle school science teachers, but now we have evolved to K through 12 resources. Another program that we have is Science Saves, where we want to celebrate how science has impacted our lives. We, just like Tim, started an International Chameleon Day. We started a National Science Appreciation Day to honor the polio vaccine. And then we also, for the past 5 years or so, and hopefully for long into the future, we have been giving away about $15,000 every year to graduating seniors going into their freshman year of college for creating a little video on how science has their lives. First place gets $10,000, second place gets $5,000, and then we have several runner-ups. So you can go to our website, .org, to learn more about that part of the program. And then the third part of Science Saves is that we also have free lessons and activities for all your curriculum needs. We have elementary, language arts, math, history, and science. And then the third program we have is Generation Skeptics, where we want to build critical thinkers We should not be believing everything that you believe. We also have over 98 bell ringers. We also have lessons for middle school and high school about how students can decipher through the onslaught of information that they get every day. All right. Thank you, Tim, for that brief commercial. Michelle says, I'm from the US heading to OBU in the fall. And I was wondering what your path has been from OBU to where you are now. And please tell us what OBU stands for.
So yeah, OBU would be Oxford Brookes University. They have a wonderful primate conservation MSc program. Um, yeah, I attended that in 2007, 2008. And yeah, as part of that MSc, I conducted my first research project with southern bamboo lemurs in southeast Madagascar. And then um, that stuck with me. And so after that MSc, I had gone on to work in the DRC for um, on a project that was funded through University of Georgia Athens. I um, worked at Emory University as a lab manager in a evolutionary psychology lab, and then eventually, but I was still always intrigued with the southern bamboo lemur and that project that I had conducted during my MSc, and so I was continuously writing grants to be able to get myself back there and figure out how to do a PhD. And I eventually got into a PhD program at Hamburg University in Germany. And that I left and I went to Madagascar. I lived there for nearly 2 years conducting research. And yeah, it was just kind of a random path of many field positions and field research. And um, eventually got a position at San Diego Zoo, Wildlife Alliance, carrying out research in Mashwal, and now with Wildlife Madagascar and NGO. So, yeah, it's been a wild ride, but I've always very appreciative of Oxford Brookes and the faculty there and my cohort, and I've stayed in touch with them very closely. I still collaborate with the faculty there, and I was even there last year to give a seminar talk, and hope to return this year to also give a seminar talk. So it's a great choice going to Oxford Brookes. They're really an amazing group of people.
So I mentioned that I've known you for 18 years, and when I first met you, I was an undergraduate student. I guess you were getting your master's. And we have had this conversation before, but I was hoping you could just briefly summarize it because we have a lot of teachers who play segments of our webinars for their students. You went to Hamburg University in Germany, Hamburg.
Yeah.
Yeah. And can you talk about being a US citizen resident going and getting your PhD in another country?
Uh,
Because I know that some countries you can get certain colleges or universities you can get for free your degrees.
yeah. So I'll back it up a little bit. So for Oxford Brookes, so I did my undergrad at Michigan State. So I'm born and raised in Michigan and went to Michigan State, did my undergrad in zoology. Um, And then, yeah, I was just kind of obsessed with primates and primate conservation, and there really weren't any programs that kind of focused on that in the US at that time. And so Oxford Brookes University was one of the few. And so I went there, that's in Oxford in the United Kingdom. And so lived there for a year, conducting that MSc. But that was you had to pay for it. It was unlike many science grad school programs in the US, which you're competing with several individuals for one or two spots that you're receiving a stipend for. But in the UK, you are paying for that MSc. So that was a bit of a hit, especially since the stock market crashed right around that time as well, or right after I attended. So I had spent a lot more on my MSc than the people the following year. Um, and then, yeah, Hamburg um, was a bit of a unique situation. I didn't, because I had already had an MSc, um, from an affiliated university, I wasn't required to take any classes, but rather I could just work on my dissertation, my research. And so initially, I just went to the field. I did not go to the university to do anything. My advisor told me, he's like, "What are you going to come here for? Just go to the field. Your project's going to change anyway. Your all of your research questions that you've spent months and years focusing on, it's all going to change once you get to the field. So better get started now and figure it out." And it did. Everything changed as soon as I got down to the field, conducted it. And then at the end of my field work, I went to Hamburg and worked on the nutritional analysis and, worked on writing and everything. But uh, yes, it was free. I didn't pay anything, which was awesome. I didn't leave my PhD grad school experience with debt. But yeah, it was all free. So very accommodating. And yeah, look at those options. Those are potentially great options compared to some of the U.S. Programs. On the downside, though, is that there was no teaching experience, and so if you're looking to get a tenure track position in the US as a faculty member at a university, you're not going to receive that teaching experience in a German or European university.
All right, for the last question, last month we had Kim from Dingus and Kevin Hunt on, and they were talking about how Ugandan poachers are learning that they can make more money taking people to see the alive animals, and a lot of like the trackers are ex-poachers.
Mhm.
And many years ago, I went to Ecuador and I was in the Ecuadorian rainforest, and for wildlife, our guide in like this little canoe boat like rammed into a tree for these little monkeys to like poke out of their hole so we could see them. And it's like, no, we don't want to see them if that's how we
Yeah.
have to see them. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how the Madagascar tourism infrastructure has changed in like the last 20 years, because you were mentioning like that
Yeah.
beautiful private organization lodge that you partnered with. And I was wondering,
Yeah.
and it's so
So
great how you're talking about communities, about how they need to be empowered with their wildlife.
yeah, so tourism in Madagascar has definitely changed over the last couple of decades. Um, yeah, if you were to have gone 20 years ago, you would see guides that were trying to bait mouse lemurs or bait civets, to come so that tourists could see them and then they could make money off of it. And because of best practices in wildlife tourism and primate viewing that have been set up by the IUCN SSC Primate Specialist Group, there's been kind of a shift away from that. It still exists in some areas, but there has been a shift away from that. Um, and yeah, so we try to avoid those sorts of scenarios, and guides are very focused on providing, natural, wildlife viewing. A lot of local communities have seen the benefits of the tourism increasing in certain areas, and so then they create their own protected areas that are adjacent to the national parks, and this has been really beneficial because we're being able to expand national parks, and it's being community driven. That doesn't mean that there aren't areas that are being deforested on the other end, unfortunately, but at least some communities are seeing the benefit and are carrying it out. Um, but infrastructure wise for Madagascar, this is one of the pieces of the puzzle that is trickiest because linear infrastructure like roads are just becoming worse and worse. Um, the airline, it's a um, nationally owned airline, Madagascar Airlines or Saradia, and they went from having somewhere around 7 to 9 planes in their fleet, and they only have 2 to 3 now, and those are constantly breaking down, and so it's disrupting travel. And so it makes it tough when you are trying to plan a trip to Madagascar, especially one that you have to pay thousands of dollars just to even reach Madagascar. And so not everybody can afford to spend 3 months or 3 weeks or 4 weeks traveling around the island. Maybe they just have a week. And so we need to come up with better solutions and better infrastructure to be able to accommodate that. And there are a lot of organizations that are working on that, and the government is focused on that with the World Bank and organizations like the Jeff, but it's just taking some time to really put it all together.
Do you see it as a net positive for wildlife, for tourism?
Sure. Yeah. If you were to go back 40, 50 years ago to Costa Rica, Costa Rica was very much in a similar situation that Madagascar is now. Mass deforestation, things were going wrong, and the government and private investors, really decided to, say, okay, we're gonna invest in a green economy. We're gonna focus on conservation and our national parks, and try to generate revenue for local people through tourism. And they built it, and now everybody kind of thinks of Costa Rica as the gold standard
Mhm.
for conservation programs and for ecotourism. And so Madagascar, there's no reason that that shouldn't be the case for them. When you go to Africa, you can go to any number of East African countries and see the same wildlife in every single country, from Kenya to South Africa. You're going to see the pretty much the same, yeah, diversity of species. Madagascar, everything there is only there. So they have a huge opportunity. And they realize that it's just getting the investments in the right place and getting many of these more rural local communities on board. It just takes time.
All right, very good. I also wanted to add that Costa Rica, I think, started the no selfie campaign with
Okay.
wildlife,
It's
where,
good. Selfies can be, yeah, really bad.
well,
That all that social media stuff. I mean, people get these misunderstandings and misinterpretations of wildlife, and yeah. So be smart. Be smart about what you do.
yeah, be a responsible tourist.
Hmm.
All right, thank you everyone who attended this live, and thank you so much, Tim.